Call to order the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 11-18, scheduled today, Monday, April 23rd at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call upon Mr. Longfellow once again to lead us in Old Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I wonder whether you might remain standing. I understand there has been what is considered to be a terrorist attack in Toronto, and we'd like to have a minute of silence for the victims, for their families, and for our first responders. Thank you. And thank you, Joel, for leading us one more time. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, are there any addendum or delegation items this evening?
No, there's not.
I'd entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Demeray, second by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? There being none indicated, record that, Madam Clerk. Call for adoption of minutes of the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 09-18, held on April 9th, 2018. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Bodnar. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. Mr. Bodnar?
Thank you. Number 11 and number 12.
11 and 12. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Main and then Mrs. Kenny. Mr. Main?
Number 4, please.
Number 4. Is that only one, sir?
That's it, thank you.
Mrs. Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1, 2, and 12. I'd like to speak to 12 as well. Thank you.
1, 2, and 12. Are there any other, Mrs. Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 3, please. And I think we have 2 lifted already, right? Thank you.
Anyone else? That's it? And entertain a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Doucette, seconded by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This evening we have a presentation from the Friends of Roselawn Center. Mrs. Bowman, or come all up.
Do you want to go accept the check?
No, I think I'll let Mrs. Butters, the Roselawn was one of your favorite items. Do you want to accept the check on behalf of the city? Then Ron Bodner. Let's not fight over it.
Somebody take the money. I'll get up. I'll go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Bodner.
Hardest time we've been getting a check.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors, and members of the community. We represent the Friends of Roselawn Center, and I'd like to introduce you our Treasurer, Pat Bowman, and our Secretary, Arlene Lassard. And I'm the Capital Campaign Lead, have been for about the last year and a half or so. And we're very pleased to announce that we've reached our goal of $50,000 that we committed to raise to be contributed towards the restoration of the beautiful mansion, Roselawn. So this year we had another juried silent auction evening for Roselawn, which was a great evening, lots of fun. And we also had a few small events. We had a paint night and we had a Name This Tune. And we're very grateful for the community coming together to support all the community members that supported us in those events. We're extremely thankful and grateful for our donors and our volunteers. We have a very strong community in Port Colborne, and it's been wonderful for me to see as an outsider coming in. I've only moved here about 4 years ago, so I'm very impressed with this city and really happy that everyone's coming together to maintain arts and culture in the city of Port Colborne. So, without further ado, I would like to present to you our final installment of $12,590, Mr. Bodner. And yes.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
You guys can sing it.
Well, they left it all to me.
All right. Put this in my, oh,
Say what you're gonna say. I'm gonna take a picture over there when you're done.
okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, ladies. It's a wonderful, $50,000 is a real shot in the arm. And you can see with the scaffolding taken down, I believe it was last week, you can see the fruits of your labor, and very much welcome, and a lot of effort has gone into this over the last 5 years, and we look to seeing you around much longer. Mr. Bodner, you're going to say a few words.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you pretty much hit on it, but, you know, this dedicated group of volunteers is what they are. And it's just amazing that they're able to put this much effort in and raise funds for, you know, what's really going to be a showpiece for the city when it's all done. So thank you very much. And I was fortunate enough to get one of the paintings at your, you know, at your fundraiser. I encourage everyone to go to any fundraiser they have. Thank you very much.
Give that to you.
Mayor visible. 3, 2, 1. Just one more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Louis.
Mr. Mayor, in your hands.
I'll give that to Peter.
Well,
Good, thanks. Come forward, Peter. Check will be in the bank tomorrow morning. Next, we have a delegation from Patty Moss regarding the trail roadside mowing delay. Welcome back, Patty.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, councilors, and staff. I am here, well, first of all, my name's Patty at Moss. I'm here with support from the Environmental Advisory Committee and speaking regarding the summary of the roadside trial area of the delay summer cut. I want to, first of all, originally my study started off with studying monarch habitat. Whether or not my concerns was if the monarch habitat can be preserved by the delay of the summer cutting. Well, after the 3 years of studying these roadsides, yes, I've concluded, yes, definitely the monarch habitat can be preserved by delaying the summer cut. I counted over 1,000 eggs and larvae amongst these 3 roads in those past 3 years. As well as, I'm just going to keep moving on because I'm going to keep it really short, this presentation. Where's the button? As well as when I was on the roadsides, I wanted to, with this trial area, I wanted to see if flowering plants could be in bloom from July onto October. I wanted to see consistent food supply along these roads. And I counted actually over 40 different flowering species that grew amongst the roads. And also I looked at the species and find out with a lot of them what purpose they have along our roadsides. And I just put a picture in here as an example. This is an English plantain. It's a small plant that grows along the roadsides. But what intrigued me the most about this plant is the pollinator that frequently visit this flower. The flowers are not even a couple millimeters in length. But what you see here is a species of the flower fly, which is the second in command for pollination requirements next to the bee species. So I just wanted to show this as a little tidbit of information. As well as with plants, I also looked at seed dispersal of all these plants on the roadsides. And once again, I'm bringing up the same topic, a plant I brought up before. Thistle species are of concern, sow and Canada thistle, because of their seed dispersal that's easily carried by the wind. These plants are especially of concerns of organic farming practices. As well as another plant species I looked at carefully, it's called the Canadian fleabane. The first time I even went to council and spoke about my roadside project, Rod Bonner brought it to my attention and council's attention of this plant. And yes, I spoke with all the farmers that are located in this trial area, and we all came to the agreement, yes, this plant is a concern because it developed a resistancy to Roundup. This plant blooms in late August, early September, and starts dispersing seeds in mid-September. So therefore, in October, some of the seeds, about almost half the plant seeds has kind of started dissipating from the plant. But it depends on year to year variations. I have an idea for this plant, but I'm going to touch base on it later on in my talk. Another thing to keep in mind, sow thistle, Canada fleabane still produce seeds, even more so on roads that receive the second cut, because they go in stress mode after having the second stress mode. Because after having that second cut, they even produce more seeds. So it's not a concern regarding mowing or not practices. This plant still produces seed heads. Initiative I started up is, I call them ditch strips. So I asked residents along these roads that frequently mow their ditches if they're willing to give up or volunteer a strip of their land along these roads. Reason being, I believe not only along farmers' fields there should be habitat for pollinators, but also along residential properties that fall along beside farmers' fields. So we can have connecting corridors of flowers and food sources for these insects. So with this strip, this is on Cedar Bay Road, with this strip I also put a bee box. It's not a honeybee box, it's a native bees. Because I wanted to see with my study if there's any native bees using these corridors along our roads. And with this next picture, this is a ditch strip on Pinecrest Road as well. And you can see with the bee box I have there's holes filled on the right-hand side of the bee box that indicates there's been bees using it. As well as I was able to capture, this is a green sweat bee, taking advantage of that bee box as well. So that also helped a theory of mine. Is there native bees running along our roadside? Yes. And how we can help them? Yes, by providing habitat. But I also wanted to share this next picture. This is a cucumber plant in my garden. I was weeding, I looked up, and lo and behold, I saw the same emerald green sweat bee pollinating my cucumber plant. I'm showing this to you today because our honeybees are having problems, and if we can sustain a habitat for our native bees, this is emphasis on ensuring a food supply in the future. I'm going to bring it up again. Spiders. I think I showed you this picture last year, but this is a picture from this past year. It's critical to have, actually, when there's standing water, growth of vegetation through this water. Reason being, it enables spiders, especially these orb weaver spiders, to make large intricate webbings over top of the ditches. It's a great control of mosquitoes. As you can see in this webbing, there's mosquitoes all caught into the threads. As well as, I started thinking about other species that feed on mosquito larvae, such as damselflies and dragonflies. A lot of people don't realize in their nymph stage, they are located in water, and their main food source is actually mosquito larvae. However, dragonflies and damselflies need the tall grasses in order to climb up out of the waterways and to molt and transform into their adult stage. This is a picture of a demonstration I did at the market last August. I released monarch butterflies that I rescued from the roadsides that were getting the cut. I also showed pictures of pollinators, pictures of our roadsides. I talked to residents regarding the initiative that the City of Port Colborne enabled me to practice and study, and I got lots of great feedback. I had residents from Waynfleet, residents from St. Catharines asking me to come to their council and try to initiate some sort of trial basis in their cities. I obviously just told them I just want to stick to the City of Port Colborne, but I just want to give you that feedback regarding that event. These roadsides, I feel that, it started off with my passion for monarchs. It moved into how I can be a corridor habitat, not only for monarchs, but for other pollinators. But also it's even expanded into some of these pollinators that follow these corridors are also predators for farmers' pests in the fields. And I spoke with farmers recently about this, and they do truly understand that, how these corridors are necessary. And they do understand the need for pollinators. But the one concern of them is dispersal of seeds. And I talked to them with some of my ideas, my future ideas, and they're supportive of it. And I'm going to keep ongoing communication with the farmers and residents along this trial area. I want to keep this short, but I have 3 requests this evening. My first request is that I could continue using this trial area as a monitoring practice of mine for my study. As well as my second request is to ask for the first cut in spring to be delayed a few weeks. It's primarily usually done in May, at the middle of May. I'm asking for the first week of June. Reason being, I'm hoping it may help hinder the seed progression of Canada fleabane. I spoke with other farmers, and they feel that that's a great strategy to try for this year. I just want 1 year to try this out. I spoke with Steve Shapowski, and he spoke with Roads Division, and they gave the green light regarding this, but they said you have to have approval from council regarding this matter. As well as I want to see if it helps suppress other fall seed heads as well. But also I'm looking at making sure it doesn't hinder any milkweed development for the monarch butterfly, which I don't think so with my ideas and what I've been seeing. As well as my third request is to have certain sections of 2nd Concession and Kalali Street to have the delay as well. And I spoke with the farmers as well regarding this. Reason being, there's large patches of milkweed growing along these roads. I collected over 500 eggs and larvae last year on these 2 roads, and I don't want to do it again. I want to see if we can just protect these pockets of areas. And the areas I'm talking about is the north side of 2nd Concession from Wilham to Babian Road, and and Kalali Street from Pinecrest to Lorraine Road on the south side. And now I understand Kalali Street is a main thoroughway road, especially for canal days. I've been told that we like everything mowed and neat for canal days, but I think this would be a great idea of leaving just a patch on Kalali unmowed where the milkweed is. We have extra butterfly signs in the city. If we can post one sign in there and we can use it more as an education tool and let other people from other towns recognize the efforts were being made for the pollination habitat and for the monarch habitat. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Patty. Are there any questions for Patty Moss? Mr. Bodnar?
Thank you. Thanks, Patty, for the work you've done with the farmers and trying to understand actually what happens with, with the problem weeds and other things. So I guess a question, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff, maybe Chris, can we delay that mowing? Is that a contract where we have to do it when we said, or is it flexible?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. The contract doesn't specify the exact dates or times, so a modification of that is just simply a notification to the contractor.
Okay, and just, Mr. Mayor, another one through you to Chris, just because there may be people watching that haven't seen this before. Is the cut delayed just in these areas, or is it on all of the rural roads?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. What we've done in the past few years is that we've actually delayed all of the cuts to the mid-May timeframe that was suggested. Because of the budgeting, we only cut twice a year, as you're well aware. So we do the May cutting in the past, and then we do the subsequent fall one after October the 1st. In this particular request to do the July or the June date modification, we would simply push those days off to those specific areas.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, I had an email from someone that has some concerns, and I just want to touch on a couple of them and see if Chris can answer them. One of the concerns were, and last year, I guess because it was a wet year when the mowing finally happened, there was a big piles of grass on the road. Maybe just because it was a wet year, but this particular person certainly has a concern with that. And, is there any danger to cyclists and, people riding on those roads? And just wants to know if the city has any liability on, if there is those big clumps of grass along there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. Yes, that was a concern that was brought up to us last season. We had to move on that and have the contractor remove a number of those locations where the vegetation that had been spilled onto the road through the mowing was quite excessive in some of the, especially the north-south roadways. For some reason, as you say, due to weather conditions or whatever, the growth was substantial compared to previous years, and that's something that's an ongoing concern that we have to do.
Okay, so then we could expect the contractor to be on that right away without being
That would be our
reminded
intention.
that,
That would be our intention, yes. We learned from our experiences last year.
okay, that's
Thank
all
you,
I
Mr.
have right
Bodnar.
now.
Mrs. Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Patty as well for your work on this. This is just an amazing, I think you've just made amazing strides forward. It kind of started out, I think there was a certain, maybe nervousness and certain, maybe certainly with the farmers and their concern over their fields and stuff. And I'm really glad to hear that you've been able to work with them and maybe are winning them over to a different way of thinking, and that's a real positive. I love the way you talk about these establishing these food corridors for the pollinators. The interesting thing is, if it wasn't for pollinators, so much of the human food we wouldn't have it. Bottom line. So this is a really good project. I think that for council to support this ongoing trial area and the monitoring and the study of it, I certainly will support that, as well as the delay of the spring cut, and I think if we can look at expanding the area to include Kalali, part of Kalali and part of the second concession. I'd like to hear more from either our staff on that or other counselors, but I'm certainly open to that idea. 500, to save 500 eggs out of that area is quite a few. I don't know, how many did you end up saving and releasing?
Unfortunately, I raised all of them. And but I'm not, I raise them very seriously. I have universities I work along with, and each one is raised individually. I test every one for parasites, look under a microscope, tag it, and then release it. And I used 42 of them for the market display. I just timed it out when they were emerging, so I have a display at the market as well for this. Thanks.
Any other questions of Ms. Moss? Mr. Bodnar?
I just say I'd support that expansion on a 1-year, limited thing, see how it works, see what response we have back from the people who are experience that in front of their homes. And I think, Councilor Butters, you asked if staff had any concerns on that. I think that's a valid question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Lee.
to Councilor Bodnar. As you're aware, there have been some complaints from some of the residents in these areas. That being said, we've had positive feedback as well as complaints, so it's the ultimate decision obviously is up to council as to which way they want to go. You've received some of those complaints and some of those accolades, as we all have. That being said, if I could interject into this and say, if the intent of council this evening is to expand to those other areas, may I suggest that we also sign those as we've done in the other areas, so that the people in the neighborhoods and in the visitors would see that this is what we're actually doing and the intent, and that we just hadn't forgotten them.
Yes, Mr. Bodnar?
Just one more comment, because I think we'll probably get 1 or 2 complaints, or who knows what, but I don't think I need to ask this question, but I know staff will deal with those complaints seriously. And if it's something like a driveway being blocked by view, which we've had concerns about that before, will staff then take the appropriate actions without cutting a half-mile swath there or something? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bodnar. Yes, we will continue in the same methods we have in the past. Any specific complaints in spot areas where there's sightline issues or whatever, those will be addressed on an individual basis.
Good, thank you.
Any further questions? Ms. Kenny?
No more questions, but I certainly think we need a motion to enable Patty to continue her work. The signage is a great idea. Was thinking that myself when Mr. Lee was speaking. So I think it's very important that we continue with this, and I'm glad Patty told St. Catherine she's staying in Port Colborne. She was taking care of Niagara South, so I would, which is a real shame, but I would like to make that motion, Mr. Mayor, for 3 things, the 3 things she asked for, and definitely the signage, so that people that live in that area know that we're still working on this and giving this a trial, a fair trial. Thank you.
Clerk, are you familiar with the 3 items specifically?
Yes.
Patty, do you have those 3? Okay, do you want to go on, Patty, to repeat them?
Would you wish them to repeat it?
Yeah, so just to make sure that I have everything, I will get the wording correct later, but it would be to continue using the areas to monitor that are currently being used, but delay that the first cut in the spring be delayed until the first week in June, and that the addition of parts of Kalali Street and Second Concession be added, as well as proper signage in those areas.
Correct.
That's correct, Ms. Moss?
That's correct.
Fine. We have another, Mr. Doucette was first. He seconded. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. We have a further delegations, but to do with items on the agenda, so we will call those delegations when we hear those items. So this time I'd move to item number 1, Mrs. Kenny.
Are we doing the councilors' items first, sir, or are we doing the ones that we pulled?
You want mayor's report now?
Well, okay, so we'll do the mayor's report and then we'll move on to
Because I have a different one for,
okay.
okay, thank you.
My report this evening is just bringing to your attention Earth Day 2018 was on Saturday, and it was great to read the reports of groups and organizations doing their part to help keep our planet clean. Special thanks goes to Mr. George McGivens of the Environmental Advisory Committee for representing me at the Earth Day celebration at Evergreen Academy. As you are aware, we had strategic planning here during that period. I also attended the Earth Day celebrations at St. Patrick's School this morning, teaching our children about the importance of protecting the earth is certainly vital. The strategic planning session was on Friday evening and Saturday. Our council's strategic planning session were held. I would like to thank members of the council, staff, and the public for giving up a portion of their weekend to work together with us to plan for the future of the city. Recommendations from the meeting will be forthcoming at a future council meeting after they have been tabulated. 40 under 40. I would like to extend our congratulations to 2 of our staff, Michelle Cuthbert and Mark Miner, for being selected as winners in the 40 under 40 Business Achievement Awards by Business Link magazine. We're fortunate to have such business-minded employees working for our organization. Later on in the agenda, we will be discussing the recent Economic Development Strategic Plan, and I see a few of the members here who are with us on the Economic Development Advisory Committee, present in the chambers this evening. I would like to thank you all for the work that you have done leading to this production of this report. You've worked a long time along with us to keep prodding us, for what I would say, from time to time, certainly when we needed it. And thank you for your work. It's appreciated. The Regional Heritage Fair, I attended and gave closing remarks at the Regional Heritage Fair held at Brock University. The entries were nothing less than excellent. Volunteer Week, I also attended an appreciation of volunteers events at Meals on Wheels and Niagara Regional Community Services. Port Corbin volunteers were strong in attendance at these events. That would be the extent of my report this evening. Any questions from anyone? There being none? Okay. Again, items for consideration. What was the question that you had, Alderman Kenny?
Usually we do councilors' items first, sir.
Okay.
And I do have one, so.
Go ahead.
Okay. That's not the one that I pulled, but the item that I'd like to bring to councilors' attention is one that just went through Committee of Adjustment at our last Committee of Adjustment meeting. A young couple had applied for a minor variance to have the structure that was on their property torn down and a new one put up, and they would charge the appropriate fee. When they brought you have 20, I believe it's 21 days before you can actually start building or whatever. But when they went to get their building permit confirmed, they were again told, oh, you need another variance because the building's too high. So she was upset, he was upset, and what I couldn't understand is why another fee was going to be charged when the variance was already applied for. The information brought to planning, and I did question the planner who spoke to them, and I have his comments here too. Just one second. Let's see if I can find it. It was pretty, see, It kind of bothered me just a bit, your worship, in that he said, I may have spoke to these people. I may have spoke. When you say I may have, it's not a very good answer to give anyone. I may have spoke when indeed he did speak to them. And just for the record, I don't think they were given the proper information. And he did, the planner did say, I met with him in February and admitted to that. I met them in February and we discussed the proposed garage, so he knew what they were talking about. Then he wrote me a second email that said, I may have spoke to Mrs. Witherspoon. Anyways, the whole point of the matter, and the reason I'm bringing it up, is I'm asking council to not ask for an additional fee for these people, because they've already paid their fee to have a structure built. And that's what I'm bringing forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But you're looking for direction from council not to charge
A second fee, that's correct. They've already paid their one fee. I'm moving that, sir.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Madam Demray. Any further discussion? Mr. Bodnar and Mr. Elliott?
I guess I have a problem with this. I think we just did something like this, and after I thought maybe it wasn't right, so this time I'm going to speak up. We don't have the planner here, do we? That is the person, Councillor Kenny, that you're talking about?
I have it in writing what he said, though.
But I get that, and I guess interpretation is different between people. I'd like to hear from the planner before I'm going to, consent to something that, may or may not be interpreted in that way, so.
Mr. Quillian, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Bodnar and council. My understanding is I talked to the planner. The original discussion that was at the second floor counter, all of the requirements for building an accessory structure, the garage, was given. Then when the applicant arrived at the counter, his wife, she filled out the application and did not include the requirement for the height. So the application went forward to increase the lot coverage and for the side yard setback, I believe. And then it was noted after that the variance was not included for height. At the time of the application being made, there was no drawing, and there was never a drawing, to my understanding, of what was actually being proposed. The Committee of Adjustments application only had a sketch of the structure and where it was to be located and its size.
Thank you, Mr. Bodnar.
Through you to Mr. Aguilina. So is that common that something just comes with a sketch? Because I guess really they were worried about could they get the variance to put it up. It doesn't require a schematic of the garage height and everything like that. Is that normal that is the way it proceeds?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodnar, typically when you have an application that needs the height, you would see an elevation of the proposal on the application. Now this development, this structure required the variance for for structure size and for setback location. So the sketch, from what I understand, only included the size of the structure and its location.
Okay, so the onus is on somebody that comes in and presents it. That's my question, like how does a layman that just comes in and thinks, oh, I did everything, is there a form that tells them that they should have put the height and everything on? I'm just trying to see, people come in and have no idea, it may be their first time doing something like that. Do we make sure that they've got everything in place, or should we make sure? I'm just trying to see, where the fault lies here.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodnar, when an application is made, the onus is on the applicant to provide all of the information and to what requests are being made. Certain times, and most times, we review the actual application to actually capture all of the variances that may have been missed. In this particular case, that review did not capture the actual request of the height, because at the time of the application, there was no indication that the variance was also seeking height. There may have been a discussion at the counter, but it was the applicant's partner that the discussion took place with, and that discussion at the counter took place 2 months before the application was made.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Elliott, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Through you to Dan, you answered some of the questions that I had, but one thing that triggers me, if somebody comes in and asks for minor variance in lot coverage, that's the footprint of the building. So if somebody just comes into planning and says, I'm going to build a building that's 20 by 20 to increase my lot coverage, which is the application, I'm having a hard time understanding how we don't ask, how big is the building you're going to build? Because you know that you're expanding the footprint of the building that they tore down because you're asking for minor variance in lot coverage. So if somebody just comes and draws a square on the ground or on their little map and says, this is the footprint of my building that I want to build, and I want to increase my lot coverage, how can that not trigger the question, well, how big is this building? I have a tough time trying to wrap my head around why that question wasn't asked. Can you answer that?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Elliott, I can't answer the question as to why it wasn't asked. The sketch that was submitted at the time of the application indicated that it was for setback and overall coverage. We tried to do the best we can by asking as many questions as we can. In this particular case, that was not caught on the application.
Go ahead, one more, Mr. Elliott.
Yep. So when we're talking about customer service, we should have check marks beside things when people are going to build something on, especially for lot coverage. Because when you're expanding your footprint, I'll say a generalization would be you might be going to build it taller than what was originally there. So why we don't go over height and things like that, when it's a one-stop shop, you should be asking those questions. Second of all, if the height variance would have been included in the original application, it would have been covered under the original fee, correct?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Elliott, that is correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, am I right? Being none. As I understand it, we're not asking that the actual application be waived, it's just the fee. So they have to make another application
Yes,
based on the...
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. When they came in, they asked questions, they did their, in my opinion, did their due diligence, and they were told, they were given the impression that the variance we paid was covered ground coverage, and Evan said, first you have to get the variance, and then you can build. So they got the variance.
But it wasn't the variance they...
No, they got the variance, they needed to get that thing. What was not mentioned, I guess, or never discussed with them, was the height. And sir, I just think it's a money grab by us if we ask them for another one. That's what I think.
Mrs. Butters, you had a question?
I think that in this particular case, as Councilor Elliott said, that those questions weren't asked and they should have been. I think when people come to counter, they don't even, I mean, you don't even know what you don't know, right? We're all, we're not experts in these things, and we really depend on the guidance. And in this particular case, I think there was a goof up made, and we should be waiving the fee for these folks, and that's my opinion.
So what has happened, we'll correct that within the department, what questions are asked when, but we have the motion. Madam Clerk, will you read the motion again that we're gonna vote on in a minute?
It's that the second Committee of Adjustment fee be waived for the applicant.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, call for the vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's carried unanimously. Thank you much, Mrs. Butters. Thank you for the discussion. Are there any further councilors' items? Yes, Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Received a letter from someone that is very concerned about the amount of garbage and just general paper, everything you can think of along the Weir Road north of Highway 3, along the banks of the Weir, over the footbridge and across along the other side of the Weir that runs adjacent to the rail line. I shared photos with council on this, and there's a considerable amount of junk, and it really looks bad. Apparently this person contacted the Seaway in February, but hadn't really heard anything back. I included bylaw on this late today, and they were back to me immediately saying that they're going to contact the Seaway and push to have this cleaned up. It is, it's really a mess, and it goes for a long ways. So I appreciate bylaw coming back on this one very quickly, and I just want the people to know that it is being looked after. Hopefully, we'll have a little more luck with the Seaway maybe than what this person had. And I think certainly I'll be tracking it, and I'm sure other councillors, and it actually is in Ward 2. I happened to get it because the person thought they were in Ward 4. But nonetheless, we all share things back and forth, and the important thing is that it gets done. So I just wanted them to know that staff is on it, and hopefully it can be done in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bodnar. Mr. Eklund, do you have any comments on this? The issue is, as I see it, that number one is done, but it's done quickly.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, I can confirm bylaw enforcement did make contact with the Seaway today by email after you made mention of the concern.
And the question is, if we don't hear from Seaway, how long are we going to wait before we do it ourselves?
Mr. Mayor, the concern is it's federal property. The city approaching and doing work on federal property would be something that we want to discuss with the St. Lawrence Seaway on behalf of the federal government.
So perhaps we will revisit this issue in the next cycle, like our next meeting. Mr. Doucette.
Just a comment, and I don't know how we can fix it, or should we get our MP involved. Seaway has a bad habit of having a letter or something being done. They put it on a desk, and then we don't see it for 6 months. And then they say, oh yeah, we gave you permission, but where's your letter that says we can do that? We have a situation right now where last fall, they gave the engineering department permission to do something, and we're still waiting for this letter. This is 6 months later. So I would suggest if you want it done ASAP, you've got to get someone in the government itself involved in some way, shape, or form, and see if they can't put some kind of a little firecracker under their bum. Okay, because the letter or whatever request is going to sit there for months after all I'm concerned. And this is the second time I've experienced this, and it's extremely annoying. And I understand they're the federal government, but the Seaway pushes it, after all I'm concerned. If you want it done, put somebody behind it and put a firecracker under it.
Mr. Eklund, perhaps we could discuss this with the Member of Parliament.
So, just
Mr. Louis?
Just super quick, through your worship, to council. It's only been 3 hours. We sent this email at 10 after 4. This one. So we strive for voluntary compliance even with federal landowners. We sent them an email at 4:10, and we can report back at the next session of council under staff responses to earlier inquiries. But if we do have to escalate this, we will escalate this to another level. But we do have lately good working relations with the Seaway, better than in years gone by, and hopefully we can rely on them to keep on nurturing that relationship by voluntary compliance. So that's what we'll strive for.
Let's hope.
Yes.
Any other on this issue? Okay, Mr. Maine and then Ms. Demray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a whole list of stuff. I have to apologize after the weekend, but I still got a full page here. From you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris Lee. I brought this up several times, and I think when Steve was here last, we wrote it all down, but I keep getting the same complaints from for 2 years now, from we had to redo the frozen waterworks. And they're the same people, and I got a call at about 4 o'clock today asking where he was on the list, because his neighbors have had all theirs done already. It's 109 Steel Street. They've even had some concrete work done, but he didn't say when they did the concrete work. But he still has a big hole in his lawn, and he wants to redo his lawn a little bit, put some seed on, but he doesn't know where to go because the hole's full of rocks. The other one is on 59 Michael Drive North. They did some work there, and whoever did the work left one of those big orange pylons on his yard, and that's been there for a year. But I think that's a contractor that left it there. And the third one is 106 Knoll Street. There's an elderly lady that lives there by herself, and her place is a mess as well. And it's been 2 years. So I think we could maybe prod the contractor into.
Mr. Lake?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Maine. I will bring this up tomorrow when I have my post-council meeting with my staff and shake the cage, so to speak, and see what we can do for you sooner than later.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. I have another one, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
And this one is for everybody. I got a call from a person who lives in just starting Westwood Estates, Phase 2. And he called concerning that the contractor was going to start putting his sidewalk in, and he said the neighbors don't want it. So I was talking to Mr. Schultz just before council started, and he said it's a requirement of him being the contractor or the developer that sidewalks have to be put in his development. So I talked back to the people who live on Renfield, and they said, well, Westwood has no sidewalks other than the one they're going to put on Renfield that goes nowhere. So we're in a quandary now because Mr. Schultz said his concrete guy is coming on tomorrow to start doing his concrete work. So I just got this stuff today, and I'm sure Mr. Elliott has something to say about it as well. But how are we going to rectify this?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Maine. You are correct. As part of the Westwood Estates subdivision, there is the requirement to have sidewalks. I know in the past there was a petition to council that dealt with the Westwood Estates on the east side where some neighbors were in objection, and what the decision of council was to then forego the need for sidewalks within that phase of that development.
Go ahead, Mr. Maine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan. That sounds good, but to me, if it's already being done in the rest of Westwood, this kind of looks like the stairway to heaven that goes nowhere, because if it's just the sidewalk that starts on Renfield and goes to the end with no conclusion, that's my point. If you understand what I'm trying to say. They don't want it.
Is it possible to have the developer put this in advance for a week or two to get the consensus in writing from these individuals who do not want it?
Mr. Mayor, if that's the direction of council, I will contact the owner tomorrow.
Mr. Maine, do you want to make that direction?
Well, I already got his phone number. It's Schultz Enterprises, and he has to know tonight whether he can tell his contractor to defer this until we have more information from, I think there's 12 people who are against it, and the person hasn't got the whole street yet, so. Is it possible for us to defer this?
On that street.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Maine, if the direction of council is to do that, I will then contact the developer shortly, once you're done this council meeting.
Ms. Demery, looks like she wants to join in here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question about it. I wouldn't want to see us make a decision on this without having heard from all of the homeowners. You know, they all need to be consulted, so, and if it could be held off as far as the concrete work going in tomorrow, that would be fine, but I don't know how they would be able to work that all out. But you'd need to have a meeting of all the homeowners to make sure everyone is in agreement, because they're all going to be affected.
Patel, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I talked to the gentleman that sent out the email to John and I, and he said he did speak with everybody. Part of the problem is that the subdivision isn't built out, so the whole street, while I believe most, if not all, the lots are sold, not all the houses are built. So you can pull the people that are there and get consensus of the people that are there. The only problem is you can't get consensus of the future owners.
That's right.
But when you take a look at the overall subdivision, I mean, all of Westwood is without sidewalks. And Dan, tell me, would a sidewalk be built not only on Renfield, but is a sidewalk a requirement on that section of Clarence Street as well?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, the sidewalk was a requirement on the west side of Renfield and on the south side of Clarence Street, and on one side on Stanley.
Okay. I would support, telling them to hold off on the sidewalk. There was a suggestion by the resident that sent out the email to contact the owners of the lots that have been sold. I'm sure that that the developer may know who they are and to try to get consensus from those. I don't know if they are developers and builders that have the lots, so you wouldn't know who's gonna move in if they're gonna turn around and sell the finished product. But if they could contact as many as possible, that would be a benefit. And the gentleman did concede that, yeah, it would be nice to get a hold of the people that aren't there yet, so. But when you take a look, getting back to the overall view of things, I mean, the entire subdivision in Westwood doesn't have them. Even if you put a sidewalk in on Clarence Street and on Stanley, they're basically sidewalks that lead to nothing. I could see if we had sidewalks that were continuous throughout the whole neighborhood, that would be one thing. But the sidewalk on Clarence, if I'm not mistaken, starts at basically at St. Pat's School.
Yep.
And so in order to get from the sidewalk on the part that is the new build, you're gonna have to walk along the street to get to the part of the street where the sidewalk is already in place. So I would be in favor of telling him, excuse me, maybe not to build a sidewalk in any of the subdivision, but as far as Renfield goes, yeah, we could move on that tonight and let him know, hold off until we contact everybody else and get a consensus from the rest of the neighborhood.
Dracula, do you feel there's consensus for that position? If not, we can go for a quick.
Just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, hold off on the sidewalk on Renfield until we can have more consensus from the owners elsewhere throughout the subdivision. Is that my understanding?
Clarence as well? You talked about sidewalks on Renfield and Clarence.
Mr. Mayor, that is the requirement of the agreement to have a sidewalk on the south side of Clarence as well.
But the particulars of the agreement were requested by City of Park Colborne, are they not?
As part of the agreement, Mr. Mayor, the consultation we have and the consultant's engineer, they're the ones that provide the drawings as to the plan for that area. And the sidewalk was shown on that after consultation with city staff.
Okay, I believe there's consensus that we request the contractor not to proceed tomorrow morning until we've had an opportunity to
Defer it.
deal with this. Is that the consensus of members of council? Yes? Yes? Okay, well then, will Mr. Aquilini make the call?
I could if he wants to. You know his number, right?
Better Pete does it.
Maybe it's better if you do it.
Do you have the number again, Mr. Aquilini?
Mayor, I have the owner's cell number, so
Okay,
call
very good, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Is there any other questions of members of council?
Yeah, I had some.
Nope. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, this is a good one. I just received this one, and some of the councilors got it too. And I won't divulge the person's name because I don't think that's appropriate, but, hello, Councilor Elliott's and Maine. I am writing to you on behalf of my parents who live over on Hampton Avenue. My dad recently had someone from Bell come by to see if anything could be done to increase our internet speed and see if there was an issue with our connection. The Bell technician found no issues, but noted that Bell is unable to install new fiber infrastructure because the city is stopping them. This is what's in the letter. He claimed that folks were complaining that the new boxes and infrastructure were unsightly and did not want them on their property. I am wondering if, one, this is true, that the city has stepped in to limit new infrastructure, and two, is there any plans at council level to increase the availability of high-speed internet options available in the city?
Thank you, Mr. Maine. I think we all like to know the answer to that. Mr. Lee, can you respond, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Maine and the rest of council. That is absolutely a false statement. That being said, I've had my staff contact Bell directly this afternoon to clarify that they get the right message out to their staff. A great deal of the municipality already has fiber optic installed. We have a couple of locations where the city of Port Colborne has denied Bell a municipal consent to put an underground plant, and both of those were in areas where we had a moratorium because after a great deal of deliberation and before, it's actually the intersection of Kalali and Elm Street. All of the utilities were given time to clean up their infrastructure and update it, and 2 months after we finished the street, they wanted to tear it back up again. That being said, Bell was denied a municipal consent at that time and told they had to go overhead as opposed to tearing up the new intersection and the new asphalt. There's 2 locations on that street that was requested by Bell 4 years ago when we did the work, and those are the only locations where any municipal consents have ever been denied for Bell installing any infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Appreciate that.
Could there be a written response sent to this individual?
Through you, to you, Mr. Mayor, yes, once we get feedback from Bell directly and their representatives for the area as to what their response is to our request, then we will let the individual know, by all means.
You could type with that, Mr. Mean?
Yeah, quite happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Madam Demery, you had a couple questions.
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, just through you to Chris. Chris, I just want to let you know that the construction in the East Village is looking like it may come to an end someday. So things have been moving along, that's a good thing. And I wanted to thank you and all of your staff for doing the door-to-door campaign. That really did help a lot. My phone stopped ringing, which was a good thing. So that was really great. So thank you very much. And my other concern was to what Councillor Bodnar has already spoken about with the trash and all of the problems up and along the weir. Some of this is not just normal litter that people toss about. Some of it is actually left over from some of the little bit of a tent city we had going on there last year. It never was cleaned up. So those kinds of things can't be left undone that way. We need to always be on it. I mean, when you see a sleeping bag lying there that you saw last August, you got to wonder a little bit. Those things need to be cleaned up. And it all goes along through Derrick Point and all through there. And those are well-traveled areas. It just doesn't speak well for us. So we need to do that. And if we're having problems dealing with the Seaway properties, it's not just the Seaway property we have problems with, because I hear this many times through various complaints that we bring forward as councillors, where if it's regional property, we can't do it. If it's Seaway property, we can't do it. There's always a reason that we can't do it. Well, and I get all of those restrictions. But that wouldn't stop us having, we have adopt a road programs. Maybe we need an adopt a fence program, because it's out of control. There's trash everywhere and it just looks horrible. So maybe that's the sort of thing that we need to institute. I don't know, but let's get some creative thinking going and find a way to get past these things. Because I've seen residents, my own husband does it along one fence, he'll clean it up all the time, because when the wind blows the stuff, the fences trap it. So in a way, it's actually easier to clean it up that way. But we need to get on it. We can't keep letting that go. So possibly we can come up with a program to deal with that.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank
Demery.
you.
Are there any members of council who wish to respond to that? Members of the staff?
So, yeah, sure, I can do it. For your worship to Councillor Demeray, I guess, I'm not sure if there's a question there, but more of a comment or direction to staff. I'll take it back to our next SMT meeting, senior management team meeting, and we'll talk about what sort of steps can be taken to have a more concerted response and be a little bit quicker on the uptake on some of those issues too, including the squatter issues and where we have people on private property or property that's not their own, leaving their belongings behind.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. Are there any other questions of members of council to staff? Mr. Elliott?
Just one quick one, I guess through you to Chris. With the extension of Clarence Street out to Cement Road, there was worry about the increase in traffic, people using it as a cut through to get out, going out to the west side. I have had a couple of people complain about speeds. Have we done any, or are we planning on doing any traffic study to see what the increase is like going out that way? Especially at commute times, going to work, coming home from work. Seems to be an increase in traffic going that way, and speeds seem to be increasing. I don't like to use traffic signs as calming measures or speed bumps or anything like that, but is there anything that we can do to reduce speed if we've noticed an increase?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. We haven't done any supplementary studies on traffic volumes since the subdivisions basically opened up the roadway. I think that right now, at this point, we'd probably have to look at some kind of enforcement from the police, specifically to the speeds that are posted or that are intended in the urban area like that. But I would hesitate in doing a traffic study immediately until the rest of the subdivision gets built out and we see what the real volumes are in and out, not just from the other neighborhoods, but from the actual residents within that subdivision itself.
Okay. There being no further questions, I'll reverse it. Are there members of staff who wish to bring an update on a former issue? Chief Cartwright.
Your Worship, thank you. I've got three short things. First of all, let everybody know as I've said before, we are continuing with our smoke alarm program, our fire safety program throughout the city. A number of residents have been notified, and we are doing our best to get to those homes on a referral basis. Second thing is, and I stand to be corrected on a date, but I believe the date for Safety Day is May the 26th. We've only got one council meeting in May, so I thought I'd make mention of it tonight. And the other thing, to go along with the issue around the garbage that's collecting on fence lines, I'm reminding the residents in the community, no open burning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Cartwright? Mr. Danch.
Chief, you mentioned the no open burning, and maybe this is going to get thrown out real quick, but we have other areas in the city where we have their weekend visitors and summertime visitors, and they're having a great time. My daughter lives in a community in Bradford, one way they police this burning is through permits. And if you want to have a chimney in your backyard so you can have a little hot dog or something like that, I realize people are idiots. I mean, we can't pick up garbage, but would this not be a bit of a way we could generate a few bucks for Peter's department and have people get a permit to have a small chimney? These places would be registered. The guys would know right off the hop. I mean, if the thing's 6 feet high, I can see the fire department showing up, but barbecued hot dogs and stuff like that and a few marshmallows, I don't see why we can't have this in the city when people outside of the city are having them all the time.
Your Worship, if I could, through yourself to Councillor Danch, you may recall that the burning bylaw was renewed within the last 2 years. That option was given to council at that time. We could have went with a permit system. Council chose to stick with the old system, that being no burning allowed unless authorized by the fire chief, and that's where we are today. We're still in that position today. It hasn't changed. I will say that permits, I've worked in municipalities where there have been permits allowed. It's not a simple thing as coming in and paying a fee. There's the going out, checking the site, making sure it's done in a safe way. So there is an added responsibility to the municipality, and I believe I spoke to that with regards to a legal opinion that we may have gotten from our solicitor at that time with regards to issuing of permits. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but quite frankly, our system is designed in such a way that if we receive a complaint, we go and we deal with it. If we don't receive a complaint, it's not dealt with. We drive by them. And just because a permit's issued doesn't mean we won't get complaints and still have to go and address it. So it increases our call volumes, and I know that for a fact from other municipalities and one in which I worked, as I said earlier. So the reality is, it comes down to your neighbors. If you've got neighbors that get along with each other, it's not normally a problem, but permits just mean we're going to get higher call volumes, quite frankly.
Mr. Danch?
Well, my daughter's in Bradford, like I said. It took her 10 minutes to get a permit. They use Google Maps. They check out the size of your lot. They look at that as being available space and where you want to put it, and they do it all over the city. Bradford has probably tripled in the last 10 years, and they're still letting it go on there. My daughter lives in a residential area for sure. I don't know, maybe this is something we can look at again, because there's a lot of people that still want to have a backyard fire at a reasonable rate, not the 6-foot pallet thing that you burn all night long and get partying with your buddies, because I wouldn't want you as my neighbor either, but a simple burn in the backyard, I don't see a big problem with it.
Are you asking for another report, Mr. Danch?
Yeah, I'd love to see that, because, I mean, I think there's people in this community that would like to have a hot dog or two or a marshmallow in their backyard. I mean, we've got people that are going to these trailer parks that live in the big city. They can't even chop their own firewood. I'm pretty sure a lot of us around here that have lived in a so-called rural area know what's going on and know how to work these things. But, yeah, I'd love to see a report on something like that.
Chief, is it possible to bring back another report?
If that's the wish of council, we can readdress it, bring it back to council, but that's a council decision to give me direction to do so.
I'm looking for direction from council. Mr. Danch?
I'd like to make a motion that a report be made up and we look at outside burning once again for people in a controlled atmosphere only, and possibly issue these permits at a reasonable fee, $20, $25 on a yearly basis, and maybe satisfy some of the people in our community.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Mr. Bodnar? We have a seconder? Do we have a... yes, Councilor Kenny.
Through you to the chief. So even if I get a permit and you get a complaint, you will come and tell me to put out the fire. Correct or not?
Your Worship, to Councillor Kenny, that again would be part of the determination of council. They would have to tell us not to put it out if there's been a permit issued, or if we think it's unsafe. That would be part of whatever would come back from council.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to clarify, are we talking about a one-time use permit, or are you talking about a year-round or seasonal use permit?
In my daughter's case, it's a year-round permit. and it's restricted. I mean, it's a chimenea. It's not the pallet burning, let's have a good time, okay? We're not down on the beach in Ward 4. We're in the city, right? I just like to see but a controlled burn under proper supervision, I think it's not a bad thing, and I'd really like to see us take a hard look at this. Thank you.
All right, we can ask for the report. Following the report, it would be a reconsideration. If that was the way you wish to go, and you would have to vote to have the matter reconsidered. Okay. Now we're just asking for the follow-up report. All those in favor? One? There's a question? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that, Mr. Main, were you for or against?
No, I'm against.
Against, okay.
I already did it before. We did 2 of them in the last 4 years.
It's already been declared, Mr. Doucette.
Yeah, I know, but just a point of order question type of thing. Just being curious more than anything else. Maybe the clerk can tell us that. I believe we decided this last spring, so it's been less than a year. So if we're revisiting it, do we not need to follow procedural bylaw? And if it has to be someone that voted in a positive to be able to bring it back, is it not? Or am I missing something here and it can be done? I don't mind one way or the other. I just want to make sure we're doing it right so we don't get caught up in.
Clerk, can you respond to Mr. Doucette?
That's all. That's my only concern.
Yep. Through the mayor, you can request more information from staff, but before you discuss the motion that staff bring forward, you have to do a reconsideration vote.
Okay, that's what I want to know. So I just want to make sure we follow the right procedures so we don't get caught up in red tape.
Is there any other member of staff has anything to respond to bring up? There being none, it's time to move on to item number 14. And we're back to you again, Mrs. Kenny, item number 1.
Yes, thank you. That the motion approved at council meeting of November 23rd, 2015, in respect of Community and Corporate Services, report number 2015-212, regarding provision of grants to community groups, be reconsidered.
Madam Demery?
I'm seconding.
Oh, you're seconding it, okay. Okay, this is before, it's another reconsideration will require a 2/3 vote.
Correct. So
Mr. Wagner?
do you want me to read the original motion, Mr. Mayor?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I had a lot of help from our clerk, thank you, Madam Clerk. She helped me, so. That an amount equal to the initial amount invested in the Niagara Regional Broadband Network, NRBN, namely $775,000, from proceeds of the disposition of NRBN shares, be placed in an interest-bearing account, and that the interest earned each year be used to provide grants to community groups in subsequent years to a maximum of $30,000. That was the original motion. What I'm asking you to reconsider, do I have to, Madam Clerk, do I have to ask for a reconsideration vote first or no? So I guess that's what I need. I need a motion to ask you to reconsider that. I'm moving it.
I'll second that.
And then we have to vote on it, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
So
So we vote on the reconsideration.
So.
vote to reconsider before I can bring up my amendment. That's what I understand, right, Madam Clerk?
Yeah.
And that requires a 2/3 vote.
Correct.
Everyone understand?
Yes.
Call for the question. Matter of reconsideration. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4.
But you have to reconsider it, and then we can turn your reconsideration down if you don't want it. Okay.
Okay. Voted, moved on, carried. Now, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Kenny.
And again, thank you, Madam Clerk, for helping me with this. And what I would like you to reconsider is that when the annual interest does not reach $30,000, that the shortfall is topped up from the principal amount invested. So that it's always that amount given back to the community, which I think is what we should do. And that's my motion to reconsider. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner and Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Peter. Peter, can you do some math for me and tell me what 775,000 might get us at today's interest rate? Just a guess, it doesn't have to be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bodnar. In 2017, the interest was in total $17,000, I believe $17,300, roughly around there. So that's what would be available in 2018 to provide grants. So if council approves the recommendation of using the principal amount, there's two things that I'd have to bring to council's attention. One is, obviously the difference is $13,000, so we'd have to bring approximately $13,000 out of the principal amount. The only thing that I would have to ask, if council agrees to that and approves that, is that there'd be an addition to the recommendation in that the difference that would may be required, for example, the $13,000 that would come from the $775,000, that we would have to borrow from our general reserve at this point in time in order to have that money available. The reason I say that is because the initial recommendation was to invest the money for high interest, and in order to do so, I actually invested it for a longer term, and it matures in 2020 in order to get a higher interest rate. So until 2020, I'd have to have council would have to give the approval to borrow from our general reserve for that top up until such time as the investment matures and we can pay back the general reserve.
Mr. Wagner.
So Councillor Kenny, are you suggesting that if 30,000 is the chosen number, which I'm not sure that'll be it, but that we then reduce the 775,000 by that 13,000? Okay, that's.
What I'm saying is that we always said we'd put that money aside.
Yes.
So Peter did what a treasurer would do, I guess, and put it in a short-term investment to get. But I've always felt that money should go back to community groups. I've always felt it in my heart that that's where it belongs. It's our community. They come, some come once a year, some only come once in a while to the table. We sit and discuss those requests among the people that sit on that committee, and I see no reason why not to continue that. If you want to reduce it to 25,000, I'm okay with that, but I still believe that money belongs back to the community. And if it means taking money from the principal amount, then so be it. That's how I feel. That's just my personal opinion. Councilor.
Mr. Mayor, for my 2 cents worth, if we maxed out 30,000 every single year into the $775,000 without any interest going back to the big principal, that's 25 years. I don't think we're going to be around for that. And people can use the money now. My opinion, I don't know.
Mr. Wagner again, then Mr. Doucette, and then Madam Bemery.
I just want to make a point to Councillor Kenny's point, and Mr. Maine, I hope you're around for the better part of those 25 years. But I don't think we can, the way I look at it is, we're just here for a speck of time, and the community goes on forever. And my original thought was put that money aside, and there will be that 13,000 or whatever it is for as long as some other council doesn't screw it up. So that's my thought process. I would certainly not want to eat away at that. I want that to be there and just be there so that we at least have $13,000. And hopefully some other council doesn't scoop it all for something done. Thank you.
Mr. Doucette, and then Madam Emery.
I find it very difficult to support that motion, strictly because of exactly the same thing as Councillor Bodnar. You use up the chunk that gives you the money to give to the community. That money will be there for a long time. And if we're going to start eating into it, of course the interest is going to be less eventually, to the point where it will not be of any real value to develop anything interest-wise. And if you do that, then what you're doing is you're telling everyone, yeah, we'll give it to you now, but later on when they really need it, later on, they will need it, we know that, we won't have any to give. And the fact that it's going to last 25 years, I'm hoping this community is here for another 300 years. This money will help the community and the groups that need it. So if we start using up what we use to get the interest to give to the community, and hopefully the interest rates go back up. So in 2020, we're going to make a hell of a lot more than that. Then at that point we should. And I believe that's why the initial motion said up to 30,000, because it took into consideration that when the interest is low, there's going to be a little less. So I don't want to change that. I don't want to use up any of that 775,000. That's a chunk. Where are we going to get that money if we want to replace it eventually? It's never going to be replaced. It's as simple as that. Never going to be replaced and never go anywhere. So I cannot support that motion in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Madam Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As someone who sits on the granting committee and sees the grants come in and the work that those grants do in our community, and as someone who realizes that $775,000 are public dollars that were put there by the people of Port Colborne, really, no matter how you look at it, it comes out of their pocket, and it should be returning to their pocket. These groups are able to go out there and take a small amount they get from us and do great work with it. That's another thing. Or we could keep $775,000 like a great big golden egg in front of City Hall, and everybody that is in need can sit there and look at it and say, wasn't that wonderful? Why would we not just take some of that money and put it out into the community where it can really do it? We expected to have 30,000 every year. This year we have 17. That's really not going anywhere. What does that do? It's exhausted in the first round, and not all the need could be met there. So I mean, these things are doing really good work. We need to consider this. I absolutely support this motion because I absolutely see the need. It's out there. These are already dollars that we have because those taxpayers put them there. Why not start doing some returning? I think that's a really good thing to do. Anyway, that's all I have to say on it.
Mr. Rodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to that, I respect the fact that community groups need money. But I think that this discussion should happen at budget time, not here. Do we want to try to find an extra $10,000 or something to top those things up at budget time from something else? That's the only time I think I would want to have that discussion, but that's it.
Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter, the original $775,000 investment in NRBN, where'd that come from?
Through Mr. Mayor, that would have been hydro funds.
Okay, so it was, yeah, so it was that, okay, on the sale, that's where it went into the bank, but to originally buy in, where did the buy-in money come from?
Time to think back a long time ago.
Right. Because that's what the 775 is a replacement of, right?
The 775, originally, it would have come from the hydro funds. I'm trying to think back now as the, because I know that the city provided some loans to the hydro, but they were paid back to the city. And based on the sale of hydro, some of those funds went towards the purchase of the NRBN. So essentially, the hydro funds is what paid for NRBN and the investment.
Okay, and thank you. And the reason I ask, if you're talking about taxpayers in general as a whole, I got no problem giving the money to community groups, but they don't target all taxpayers.
They don't.
Right? So there are some people that don't derive any net benefit of giving the money out. And if we wanted, and if $30,000 was the number we were looking for, why did we include up to $30,000 in the original motion to put it through? How long is, and I'll ask Peter again through you, Mr. Mayor, how long has the money been in investment for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this was done in 2015.
And what's the returns been since then?
Approximately about 1.5%.
Okay. So in order to get to 30%, or to get to $30,000, you're looking at 3.5%, 4%. Is there anything out there now that pays 3.5% to 4%?
Not unless you're getting into some higher risk.
High risk?
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't, I'm taking it, we don't want to venture into the extremely high risk to lose anything. So the problem is you'll never ever get to the $30,000 limit, and the quicker and the more you draw down, the less interest you're going to make, so then you're going to continue to draw out more off the balance, because you're never going to get to, if you're drawing off 1.5%, 2%, you're never going to get to $15,000, $17,000 because you're drawing off the principal. So you're going to draw more quickly off the principal than you make on your interest. So you're kind of turning it around to, pretty soon you're going to get to the point where you're going to be drawing almost all off the principal because you won't be getting any interest over a number of years. So I'm like Councillor Bodnar, I would like to see it remain as it is. If we included the words up to $30,000, that means we weren't expecting $30,000 in interest as the amount coming in year over year. We knew pretty much you may draw less, and we were okay with that. So I would like to see us just continue to spend the interest money. That's all.
All questions are exhausted. Then we'll call for the question. All those in favor? What?
On our reconsideration?
We voted on the reconsideration.
Are we voting now, Madam Clerk?
Yes. So the vote, the motion on the table would be the original motion, including the two amendments, one being that when the annual interest does not amount to $30,000, that the shortfall is topped up with the principal amount invested, as well as that the difference that may be required to be borrowed from the general account until 2022 when the amount matures.
Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion's carried. Okay, moving on to item number 2. Madam Kenny, you have that one as well. Madam Kenneth?
Yeah, I'm in my other thing. Now we gotta go back and see one thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I pulled this because we have a delegation here to speak to that, but it's Community and Economic Development Division Report number 2018-57, subject Economic Development Strategic Plan 2018-2028. That in accordance with the recommendation of the Economic Development Advisory Committee, the Port Colborne Economic Strategic Plan 2018 to 2028 be prepared by MDP Insight be approved, and that the goals and initiatives identified in the Economic Development Strategic Plan be included in Council's future strategic planning process and budget deliberations. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, there's members of the Economic Development Advisory Committee here that are in attendance, and this is why this item was pulled. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Seconded by Councilor Butters. Any discussion on the recommendation? I'm not sure, the delegates ready, or are they prepared to speak to this? They don't have to, was my understanding that you would not be, but you're happy?
Everybody's happy?
Okay, discussion, questions? Mr. Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Julian's here. I don't know if you want to make any comment about, sorry, about the report, or if you don't, that's fine. You might not be prepared. But if you want to.
Jolene, do you have any comments that you wish to make?
Yeah.
No, you don't have to.
No, I was saying the EDAC were being hard on this, and I think they put their opinion forward, and we're able to work with implementing the strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
From members of the council?
Yeah, just real quick. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, so, because we did receive the report at EDAC and supported it and brought it to council for its approval. And Julian is going to make a report, come back to EDAC based on the consultant's report in June, I believe, was when we were going to have, so that she can work with it and give us some advice that we can take on in our summer recess and have a review before we reconvene in the fall.
Any other questions, comments? Call for the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? It's carried. Next item is number 3. Mr. Halinga, you, this is you have a delegation. You wish to make comments, and Mrs. Butters, do you want to put the recommendation on the floor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, I will. Planning and Development, Planning Division Report Number 2018-50, Subject Supplemental Recommendation Report, Proposed New Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw.
Is there a seconder? Mr. Elliott? Mr. Halligan, did you wish to comment on this? Your delegation. We treat you as delegate and have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors, staff, and public. This could be very short depending on the answers to a few questions. And the first question, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Planning Department, will the amended mineral aggregate operations zoning, when it comes up to council, will it require a public meeting? Should I ask all my questions in sequence and then get the responses, or can I read them one at a time?
Let's go one at a time, respond one at a time. Is that okay, Mr. Eckelina? What would you prefer? Okay, let's go one at a time.
Okay, so that was the first question. Will it trigger a public meeting when the amendment for mineral aggregate operation zoning comes forward?
Mr. Aquilina.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the presenter, yes, if there's any change in the zoning bylaw, it's going to require a public meeting under the Planning Act.
Thank you. The next question is, will notifications of that meeting be distributed to the residents adjacent to the zones?
Mr. Aquilina.
Mr. Mayor, I'll do better than that. I'll actually put a notice in the paper, and I can contact all the property owners that are abutting the mineral aggregate zone within 120 meters.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Mayor, the question was answered that it will affect, or that the notification will be 120 meters. However, depending on what is permitted, what permitted uses are in the MAO zone, it may have an impact significantly beyond the 120 meters. I propose that it should be a notification distance equivalent to the separation distances that are required under MOE D6, which recognizes what uses there are and what separation distances there should be. So if it requires a specific separation distance, it should be all the people within that separation distance should be notified of the meeting.
Mr. Eklund.
Mr. Mayor, if council would like a greater notification other than what the Planning Act requires, then it would have to be a direction of council.
Mr. Eklund or Mr. Hellinga?
The next question is probably going to just be an estimate, but when is it expected that the MAO zoning amendment will be presented to council?
Are you in a position to answer that, Mr. Eklund?
Mr. Mayor, I can advise that right now the interim control bylaw is for a period of 1 year. Council can extend it for another year if they so choose. My goal is to have something back to council within the next 6 months.
Thank you.
And that just allows me to make one comment that I would suggest that this council has dealt with this issue almost its entire 4 years. They are entirely up to speed on what has happened over this length of time, and they are the most qualified to make a decision on it. And I would suggest that the amendment come to this council for a decision before the election in October.
Thank you for your suggestion, Mr. Hellinga. Are we finished as far as questions go? Mr. Hellinga, are there any further questions?
No, that concludes my questions and comments. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Mr. Hellinga? Mr. Elliott and then Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jack. You're obviously familiar with the regulations, with the setbacks of the proposed zoning or uses. How far is that?
It depends. If it is a light industrial use, it may be 120 meters. If it is a heavy industrial, an asphalt plant, or another plant that can have significant impact, it can be up to 2 kilometers or even beyond that. It depends entirely on what is permitted.
Okay, thank you. I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dan, not only on a notification in the paper or wherever you're going to advertise, I'm going to say, can we incorporate mailings into all along Chippewa Road, right into Bethel? I would almost say second concession. Yeah, second concession to Miller, north to 3rd, if not farther. Is that far enough?
Mr. Eklund?
Or thereabouts? Just so that the people that are, I'm going to say, northeast of the site are informed that there is going to be a public meeting. Generally, the winds are obviously out of the southwest, so the people that are northeast of them should be notified by mail. And I'll look for council direction on that.
Mr. Bodnar has a question.
I was just going to say, can Councillor Butters and I sit down with Dan and come up, rather than try to do it on a, right away? We've done this for other hot button issues, and, I think it's fair that we give everybody a notice so that someone doesn't find out after the fact. So I think we could come up with a pretty wide area that would at least be that big, if not bigger. If council's okay with that, I think we could work out something. Jack, is that something that would be
It was only a suggestion on my part.
Yeah, I know, Jack, yeah, I know. That's good. We got it.
Okay, no further questions of Mr. Halinga? Thank you, Mr. Halinga.
Thank you, Mayor.
I notice there are individuals here from Mr. Rankin's. Would they wish to make a comment at this stage? Again, you don't have to. You're fine.
You guys can send out the notice as far as you want.
Okay.
The more the merrier.
Okay, are you ready for the question? A question, Mrs. Butters.
Not so much a question, but as a comment, and that is that I really want to thank Dan for really listening to all the information and suggestions and incorporating this interim control bylaw. I think that has been a really good thing. And the other thing I want to just encourage is that this council does deal with this issue. It is very, very important that we are the ones that have been. We've heard from the public. We've all sat in our seats, and when this gallery's been full of folks, this is an issue that we need to deal with before the end of this term. I think it's that important. So I really appreciate that you feel that you can get it back to us in a very timely manner. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott?
Just one further thing, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Dan. Just so that people understand that the new comprehensive zoning bylaw will be passed tonight, save and except for the interim control bylaw for one area, correct?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor, correct. If council passes the bylaw tonight, it will then be advertised and there will be an appeal period. The interim control bylaw, the direction tonight is to approve it, provided that a future report is going to come back to council with the actual position as to the specifics on the permitted uses and the prohibited uses. So council tonight is approving the bylaw, but that just then allows myself to do the further proper study.
Okay.
To then be able to come back to council.
And the appeal period for the bylaw is?
It's the same as through Mr. Mayor to Council Elliott, it is a 20-day appeal period.
20-day appeal period.
Upon notice.
Because I do have a couple of people that want to take pieces of me apart, that they've waited a long time for this, and they're getting tired of waiting to get their approval to move forward with their projects. We've postponed this for public meetings for some things, but there are other people that have projects that they want to move forward with and need this to be approved. So I want to be able to tell them, you got 20 days after tonight for the appeal period, and then it'll be good to go. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Thank you.
Mr. Bodnar?
Just because I don't want Councillor Elliott to get beat up anymore. Is it 20 days from tonight or 20 days from when you get it in the paper?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Bonner, 20 days upon notice of the passage. So that would be 20 days upon it being advertised.
Okay, I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Elliott, are you voting? Yeah. Okay, it's passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 4, Mr. Main.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Report number 2018-48, subject fire marquee. Here we go. The purpose of this report, prepared by the fire chief as a result of an inquiry from Mr. Chris Carriere, National Municipal Accounts Manager for Fire Marquee.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Demeray? Questions? Comments? Mr. Main?
It's not that I'm against this, but basically what I'm against is, I mean, we've had strat plan for 2 days. We get this report on a Thursday, and we've got 730 pages that we've had to go through and have to make a decision for a Monday. There are a few questions I'd like to ask, but I also would like to have a chance to absorb this, like all the other ones, and because sometimes when, if it's too good to be true, it is. And I just I have to get my mind around this a little bit, and I don't think that I should, but I would like to defer this till next meeting, just for the simple fact that I'd like to catch up on what's going on with this, and
You're making a motion for a deferral? Is
I'm
there
asking for a deferral.
Seconder? John, the representative here. What are we saying here?
Okay, hold on a minute now.
Company is here.
Okay, the fellow from the company is here, which means, yeah, go ahead and talk, but I still want to have, to absorb this. I don't want to do it in 2 hours or 3 hours' time and say, yeah, I agree with this. So by all means, yes, have the representative come and talk. We can do that, can't we?
Okay, pass a motion to allow gentlemen of the company to give us an explanation. Moved by Mr. Main, seconded by Madam Demery. Could you come forward, sir, to the podium here?
Your worship, if I could.
All those in favor of this motion? Carried.
Can you get Tom to maybe introduce him? Or?
Tom, you know
Your
this
Your
one?
worship, if I could, I'd just like to bring a little clarity to this. This discussion with this company has occurred over the last, I want to say, 5 or 6 years. When it initially started, we had another CAO here at the time, and we did discuss it to find a feeling if we wanted to go in that direction. There has been some clarity brought to it over the last couple of years, and that's why after the mayor had been to a recent meeting, he suggested that we should take a serious look at it, and senior staff have looked at it, and that's why we have Mr. Carrier here this evening to answer any questions that council may have. A number of those questions were included in this report, but there may be other questions that need to be asked, and who better to ask but the gentleman that's moving forward with this. Thank you.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Carrier.
Carrier, yes. Yes, it's nice to meet you as well, Your Worship. I like your council chambers, by the way. They're quite pretty. I'm the former mayor of the town of Collingwood. I served for 4 years as mayor and 9 years as a councillor. And I think your chambers are quite exceptional.
Thank you.
Do you want me to go into what we do?
Yes, well, I just,
Or just
Mr.
or
Mains
questions?
asked that you come forward.
Firemark began 7 years ago. It was created by a number of retired insurance adjusters who noticed that there was an opportunity, especially in Canada, under the additional coverages section of insured peril, so property issues, that consumers were paying for a coverage for which municipalities were not recovering. So we've created a company to advocate on your behalf with insurance companies to invoice for the expenses incurred up to the limits of the policy. So we're not asking the consumer to pay. We're not asking the consumer to pay up front and be reimbursed from their company, from their insurer. We do all of that work. We get a copy of the standard incident report that your staff is already filling out. We do all the interaction with the insurance companies. The issues for us that make it a little more complicated is that there's about 207 insurance companies operating in Canada, and most of them are operating in Ontario. Some of the larger companies, I'm going to use cooperators as an example. They have regional adjusters, and we would contact those regional adjusters, and they have different processes that we would interact with them so that we make it easier for us to recover for you.
Any other questions of Mr. Carrier? Mrs. Butters and Mr. Main?
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, Mr. Main then.
How do you deal with Queens Highway? I didn't see anything in the report about if there's an issue on the Queens Highway.
So these are property-related calls, so you're talking structure fires, tornadoes, plane crashes. Boats are usually considered, a boat fire is usually a property, it's not a motor vehicle. Explosions. The Angus tornado that occurred in 2014 in Essa Township, Essa was our first client, and there was a tornado June, I want to say 14th, 2014, and we recovered, it There's 103 properties that were hit with that tornado, 41 different insurance companies that we had to deal with. It took us 21 months to recover the funds for Essa Township and the 4 neighboring departments. So it's not all of the department's calls, it's only the calls that are related to property and only those that have insurance coverage. So it doesn't affect the policyholder in what they get. They're still entitled to, let's say your home burnt down, you would still be entitled to your home to be rebuilt, the contents replaced, put up in a hotel, all of those things, while all of that work is going on, plus some other expenses. Under the additional coverages section, there is some funds for the fire service. Firemark has over 100 clients in 3 provinces. I'm hopefully going to be notified soon that our first client in British Columbia is going to be coming on board later this evening, and we're hoping to expand in some east provinces as well. Our largest client is the City of Kitchener, population of 264,000. Our smallest client, Village of Newbury, near London, Ontario, population of 494 with a council of 5. So 1% of their population is elected officials. How would staff like that? You know?
Yes, I'm not trying to be derogatory, but you've got to figure this out. You people have been talking to our staff for 4 or 5 years now, and I get this report on a Thursday and expect to read it and vote on it on a Monday. That's my issue. It's not necessarily my issue with you or your company, but I would like to see reports like this, and it's a good report. 4 days isn't enough for me. I don't know about the other counselors, but not what we had this weekend. So that would be my biggest point. And I'm glad you spoke and how many places that you represent, and our fire department will be able to get some money back. Just as long as and you already stated this, that the ratepayer, not the ratepayer, but the person with the insurance still has to pay. So I would like to have known this 4 years ago. But
That's not actually
feel my pain.
Mr. Carey's problem, but we appreciate your comments. Madam Demray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. I'm really very glad to see you here tonight and glad to see this report in front of us. I do remember speaking to representatives from your company at Deerhurst and at Nottawasaga, 2 of the OSAM. I believe you might have been one of them.
Yes.
I brought the information back to our CAO at the time and thought it was a good idea then. I still do. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. I've also done a number of presentations to AMCTO. I love doing presentations to clerks and to see if a former mayor is good enough to challenge them on the interpretation of the Municipal Act. So far, I've done okay.
Very good.
Mr. Doucette, Mr. Dench, Mr. Bonner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If I read this right and if I understand properly, you're not doing this for free. So you're getting a certain amount of money and the city is getting a certain amount of money. Can you break that down a bit just to make everyone understand that we're going to get money we usually wouldn't get anyway because we don't have the time to do it, but you also have to have a chunk of that. So I think that's important for everyone to understand as well.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Through his worship to you. It's a 70-30 split. So 70% of the gross funds recovered come to you, 30% we retain for ourselves. If we look at a file and we do not recover, there is no cost to you. If the policy has very low coverage and we've incurred expenses, let's say, that exceed the recovery, there is no cost to you. It's only a 70-30 split. There is no annual, there is no minimum. Okay.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Dench.
To the presenter, to Mr. Mayor there. You answered my one question because I was going to ask you how long you've been around, but you told us 7 years. You're saying that insurance is not going to go up. Now, the insurance company with their offices all over the place, and I'm looking at what you represent community-wise and size and stuff like that, don't you think that these guys are going to say, hey, listen, Port Colborne's got Mark's on board. We're going to raise everybody 2%. We're not gonna say nothing, we're gonna just say we need to, because the pie is only so big. When you say there's gonna be no additional cost to the policy owner, well, they could just basically hide it in the premium, could they not?
Through your worship to the councillor, no. In establishing the premium amount, they've already, much like you do with your municipal budget, you're already projecting what your costs should be. So you've already projected that you should have this many losses in a year, and this is what it should cost you in total. So in essence, you're paying for the projected, for your budget amount, right? And then at the end of the year, you look at your actuals. Imagine this scenario. You've budgeted hydro for this building at $10,000 a year. You become concerned as a councillor only when it exceeds $10,000 a year. Well, currently in the premium setting for the policy, they're charging for the coverage, but the actual output is zero. Could you imagine if you were charging your ratepayers $10,000 a year for heat and hydro, but the actual was zero? They would be upset.
I still don't see how these guys would not look at your representation there and not say, like, we gotta add 2 points.
Sure, so let me put it another way. In the fire that occurred in Fort Mac, that was a $4 billion insured loss. 71.1% of that $4 billion insured loss was reinsured. So the Canadian insurers reinsure themselves against major losses. So all of those companies that were involved in those thousands of properties in Fort Mac, they had it reinsured. So they got $2.8 billion back from the reinsurance market against their loss. So they really only accrued $1.3 billion. Fort Mac fire estimated costs were $17.2 million. If they had been on this program, they could have recovered that $17.2 million from the insurers, and it was 100% recoverable through their reinsurance. This is a very small component of the overall cost for your premium. It's a very tiny portion of the overall risk for the insurer. But those $2 and $4 and $5 items, when you have thousands and thousands of clients in tax insurance, 5 million plus clients, it adds up. There is no risk for your policy going up. None.
I'm done.
Mr. Ryder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I just want to pick up on something Councillor Doucette said, that this is money we haven't gotten. Please, Mr. CAO and Mr. Fire Chief, please tell me that we've claimed for some of these in the past, because I'm pretty sure we have.
We may have.
Your Worship, if I could partially answer that question. The only way we've claimed money back is through our fee schedule, and we don't normally bill back for house fires or building fires, with the exception of if it's intentionally set. We have invoiced for that in the past. But as far as billing insurers, we haven't billed insurers. It's been a point of discussion in the past, but it's never been brought to council for various reasons.
So,
Mr. CO?
through your worship to Councillor Bonner, I believe, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't charge for firefighters' time, we don't charge for fire vehicles. If we bring in an excavator to secure a scene, if we bring in public works officials to board up a building, we do charge that back to the property owner. But we've never done this in the past. We do this in car accidents. So this company does nothing to do with car accidents, but we do that our own for car accidents on provincial highways, not on city streets, and that's perfectly legal. This is also perfectly legal, but we've never done it in the past. We've actually had a number of council members over the years come forward and say, after seeing a presentation at a conference or something, why don't we do this? And actually, as recently as the last month, we've actually had taxpayers come forward and say, why isn't the city doing this? It is absolutely money that we do spend. It absolutely is recoverable legally, and at no, according to Mr. Carrier, no cost to the homeowner. And it's written in the report, but you'll also notice if for any reason there was a homeowner who had a fire in their house and didn't have this coverage, so therefore wasn't protected by insurance, that Firemark would not pursue them in that individual case. So there's no cost to a city taxpayer. But short answer is no, we've never collected this in the past.
Not the answer I wanted to hear, but I guess that's, and so if we were to take advantage of this company, it's just because we either don't have the manpower or we don't want to put the manpower towards it. There's nothing stopping us from going after the homeowner's insurance other than time and
Can you answer that?
expertise.
So with the 207 companies out there, when we first began our business model 8 years ago and started implementing it 7 years ago, we had anticipated having 5 or 6 streams. We have dozens of streams, process streams that we interact with depending on which company, which insurance adjuster that we're dealing, which region within that insurance company that we're dealing with, and set them with some of the smaller companies we're dealing directly with their adjuster. Your staff, with all due respect, would find that extremely frustrating. We have a database of over 1,600 policy wordings. We also have a database of industry contacts, professional contacts that my technical team folks who have insurance backgrounds know and have worked with a lot of them in the past as well. So we're bringing that to the table. We have clients who within their treasury departments already have insurance adjusters who work within the Treasury Department. Those are the legal liability, the slips and falls specialists. You trip on the sidewalk, you sue the municipality. We are property insurance experts. That's what we're bringing to the table, and those are the files that they've deferred to us.
Any other questions? Mr. Bodnar, follow-up?
I get the concept, and it is then money that we haven't collected. And I feel stupid because we didn't know this beforehand and we could have been possibly collecting. And if we don't want to hire our own people to do it, then this is certainly an option to do it, so. But I have no problem with Councillor Main if he wants to bump this to the next meeting to get an understanding of it. I don't think this is time sensitive unless, God forbid, we have a fire tomorrow and we haven't signed on, but maybe the presenter can tell us that.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Mr. Carrier. Do you claim back against actual costs or do you claim against the policy limit?
We claim back actual costs subject to the policy limits. So let's say it's a $10,000 cost to the municipality and there's only $5,000 worth of coverage. We will itemize the $10,000 in cost to the insurance company, but we will only invoice for the $5,000.
So we're getting back
$3,500 and we would get $1,500 on the 70-30 split.
So we wouldn't get returned back our actual costs.
The example that I did with Essa Township with the tornado, that was, I'm on television, it was, let's say, 6 figures that came back and it recovered the cost for Essa Township plus the 4 neighboring departments, the full cost. It just depends on the coverage.
On the coverage.
We're not going to invoice. My role as a former municipal guy was not to harm the policyholder. I did not want a constituent calling you up and complaining. So we only invoice to the limits of the policy. It's deductible exclusionary, and it doesn't affect the amount of monies that they're entitled to receive.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. And this is, the insurance companies have the full expectation, I would assume, that they at some point in time will have to pay this out of the policy. It's just that nobody's actually claimed it.
If you asked a large insurer, I'm not sure who your municipal insurer is, but let's say it's JLT. So Jardine Lloyd Thompson budgets monies, I think it's 2.4%, 2.3% gross premiums sold for their contingent profit commissions. So that means that the brokers get money on the front end, and they also get money on the back end. The more profitable that book of business is, then they get a thank you check from the insurance company at the end of the day. So when the insurance companies tally up the homeowner's policy, they'll say, okay, this is what we paid, this is what we should have paid. What we didn't pay was the fire department expenses, because we never pay those. So those go into the profit equation and help offset those contingent commission checks on the way back. The choice is really simple. The insurance company keeps the profit, or you get it. The policyholder is not entitled to it. Only two groups, the fire department or the insurance company. I'd prefer you get it.
Mr. Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Historically, and I'm going back, and maybe the chief knows more about this than I do. Historically, fire departments were created by the insurances and were always paid by insurances many, many years ago. And that's how fire departments started, because it was to their advantage to have someone fight a fire so they don't have to pay as much to have something rebuilt. That was historical in nature. I don't know if everyone realizes this. What I like about this is that we're going back to something like that, because they were the ones that were benefiting from it, and we should be getting something back, because for whatever reason over the years we've taken over some of it, but they should also be paying a chunk of it. And this is what this does. And I really like the idea. Why we never did it before, I don't know, Councillor Bodner, but let's get to it and let's start getting money back for the services we give our citizens. And let's start making sure that our citizens get the money back.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I see Madam Butters has her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm originally from Collingwood as well, so it's nice to, welcome to Port Colborne.
Is it relation?
There's a whole bunch of butters.
Okay.
Whole bunch, we'll talk later. So this appears to be a no-brainer to me, and I'm prepared to support it tonight, although if Councillor May needs the extra time, I certainly respect that as well. Thank you.
It's not a question of this company or anybody else who's spoken tonight. It's 750 pages or 30 pages from Wednesday to now. And I think, for all fairness, for everybody that has something here, an item or whatever, that's too short of a time. It really is. It all looks good to me, but I have to make that statement, because I'll have people calling me up tomorrow saying, who the heck is this company? That type of thing. So
Okay,
I'll go with the flow. It's not a big deal.
Let's move on. Thank you, Mr. Carrier. We appreciate your input this evening.
Thank you, Your
And
Worship.
we have a motion on the floor to defer this, to win. Yes, there is, has been seconded, Madam. Don't have a seconder?
Go for it. I don't care if you guys want to. If it's okay with him. Is this time sensitive?
Go ahead, Mr. Carrier.
Sorry, Mr. Carrier.
Through you, Your Worship, this is your committee of the whole meeting, correct?
Yes.
So you're going to have to pass the bylaws in that at your next council meeting? Or you do it this, sorry, I'm just asking, I'm not sure what, I didn't read your procedural bylaw before I came. What I would recommend is that you pass the instructions for the fee amendment. We've had clients do that. We've had clients who've passed say, let's enter into a contract, and then the fee amendment comes later. And in the interim, there's been an incident. It does happen. So if you pass the fee amendment and you want to pass the contract later, pass the contract at your next meeting. The contract has a 30-day cancellation notice, no harm, no foul, but at least if your fee amendment is there, you're covered as of this evening.
Thank you for your comments. Looking for some direction from the clerk or from the CAO?
I'd like to do a deferral. Do you want to vote the other way?
Deferral.
We have to have a second, so if there's no seconder.
Take it by. So we can vote on it and see if everybody's.
Okay, we have a motion deferred and seconded. Pardon?
Go ahead.
Call the question. All those in favor of the deferral to win next meeting?
Next meeting?
Next meeting?
Yeah.
The next meeting.
All those want to defer it to the next meeting? We're voting, John. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's deferred. Thank you again, Mr. Garrier.
And we'll be able to also get people want to stop.
Item number 11, Mr. Bodnar.
Mr. Mayor, Community and Economic Development, Parks and Recreation Division, report number 2855, subject citywide parks grass cutting tender.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councilor Dench. Speakers, comments? Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you. Through you to Chris, would you be handling this one? I can't remember a report coming to us where a tender was put out and we had so many disqualified bids. Maybe there has been, I just can't remember that it got down to one. So was this a complicated tender, or was it just that they just didn't put in the right numbers or whatever? I'm just curious. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. Actually, this is the first time that this specific group of contractors has had to deal with our new procurement and purchasing policy, which has all of the legalese and procedures and everything involved. And as you can see, one contractor in particular who's dealt with other contracts has actually had the cross the right T's and dotted the right I's, if you would. So that's essentially the basis of why it turned out the way it did.
Okay, so, maybe that would have been the winner anyways, I don't know that, but did we give them a little schooling in what they might, I know that's maybe not our responsibility, but if we've changed something to be more complicated, was there any talk, was there instructions or anything like that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar. My understanding is that staff hadn't received any inquiries or any input from any of the contractors that had taken out documents. So that being said, no questions asked, no questions answered.
Okay.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chris. Can you talk about any of the disqualified bids, or because they're disqualified, you have to be silent on them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott, if you could repeat the question again, just to...
Because the bids are disqualified, can you talk about them? Or because they're disqualified, you have to remain silent on the bids?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott, because they've been disqualified, it's not public information, the document wasn't open and taken to the final pricing stage.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know, because it on the surface of it, when you're taking a look at it, you've got somebody that bid and got disqualified, but then the recommendation is to hire the people that got disqualified. So I'm kind of curious as to how we reached that decision.
Do you want me to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The qualifying bid was over the city's budget for the entire project, so staff looked for some, there was some interest from Snips Landscaping to extend, and as a result, we were able to achieve some efficiencies there.
Okay, so it says in the recommendation, for the supply parks grass cutting services with Snips Landscaping Nursery be extended for 1 year in accordance with the terms of the existing contract. What's the cost of that existing contract? Do you know?
So unfortunately, I would have included, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would have included that information in the report, but at the time, they hadn't submitted the pricing to us. I received it last week, and it's approximately $10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Biden.
Just a statement that I think council has encouraged staff to do this, where somebody will extend their bid for, and if they've been very good to us, I think that's a good deal for the municipality, so I would never question that part of it. It just seemed weird to have that many disqualifications, but I get the whole reason for it, so.
Mr. Louis, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just through your worship to Councillor Bodnar and sort of in support of what the director said. I did talk to the staff member before the report was prepared about the course of action we're going to decide to take. It does seem a little out of the ordinary that we would recommend one of the disqualified bidders as the successful bidder, but what the situation is, like the director described, the only successful bid results in a fee that's higher than our annual budget, and we can't spend more money than council is allowed for this expenditure. So what we did was go back to the bidder, and we do this all the time, as Councillor Bodnar has referenced. For example, you'll remember 2 or 3 reports last year in the fall at the same council meeting to extend concrete, to extend asphalt paving and so on. And perhaps that's the course of action we should have taken at the very outset, is to extend the existing contract. We were hoping to secure more favorable pricing. The unfortunate was that we had the complete opposite effect, where we actually secured pricing that was beyond the amount that council provided for 2018. So that's why you see something in front of you that you don't see every day, you don't see every meeting, but it's well within our purchasing bylaw, our procurement rules, and hopefully we can extend this contract 1 year and then secure more favorable pricing that meets budget in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Louis. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the CAO. Okay, that being said, I guess the only question I have is on an open and transparent bid. If you've got 4 disqualified and the only qualified bid is over budget, should we not retender?
So, through your worship to Councillor Elliott, I did speak to the staff member who wrote the report about that, and it was simply a case of time. We do our first cuts in May. By the time we put out a tender for 4 to 5 weeks, plus the staff report, council meeting, and so on, we would have been into our second or third cuts of the year, and it was just unfortunately we were under the gun time-wise, and we wanted to bring forward to council for a final decision.
Okay, thank you, because just on the optics of it, if there's other companies out there that take a look at this and want to make a bid for any work within the city of Port Colborne, and then they see that you know, they went and hired somebody that had a disqualified bid. The optics of this, to me, I'm not sure if it sends any ripples out to other people that want to do some work with us, but if we can say that we're secure in what we did, and for some reasons, because of time constraints and stuff like that, I just, when you look at it, yeah, you're disqualified, but we're going to hire you anyways. That doesn't lend itself to acquiring good bids going forward. So I just want to know that everybody's upfront with this and why we rehired the company that provided the service previously.
Sure. You want me to speak to that?
Go ahead.
Just through your worship to Councillor Elliott, exactly right. Staff agrees with that 100%. The situation that we're up against here is a little bit unique because it's a service we provide, and maybe we have to look at different ways of providing that service, such as the number of cuts per year, or bringing the service back in-house and doing it with our own staff and our own equipment. But we can't exceed budget. And even though it's not a perfect analogy, if you imagine we had budget for a piece of equipment to buy, that's why we put in our tender documents, the lowest or any bid may not necessarily be accepted, because if council's given us $40,000 to buy that $40,000 piece of equipment, but it comes in at $45,000, we just can't buy it. Or we have to come back to council and say, let's defer this to next year, or let's get funding from somewhere else. And that is simply what happened here. We didn't have enough money to enter into a contract with what was the only acceptable bid.
There being no further questions, we have the recommendation on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Final item is item number 12. Mr. Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Bylaw Enforcement Division, report number 2018-46, proposed lot maintenance bylaw 2018.
Is there a recommendation, or is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Butters? Questions or comments? Mr. Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sherry. Thanks for staying till the end of the meeting. In here is, sorry, I think I highlighted, yes. Okay, so there's some changes here. One of the changes, I believe, I don't think it was there before, is on page 387. And it's the building material, sorry, that's where it says it, building material. So the concern from someone is that when they got their building permit, and please tell me if this is wrong, they were told they had a number of years to build, they're building, remodeling their house, building an addition thing, and they're doing it themselves. So they do it when they can afford to do it. But they have the material on site, neatly packaged, enclosed. I think they said they had 7 years to finish the building permit. I don't, that seemed like a long time. Can you clear that up, Mr. Egelin?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bodnar. If the chief building official extends a building permit, that would have to be at the direction of the chief building official.
Right. Okay, so what they're worried about, and it does happen sometimes, we're trying to fix, I think with this, a problem with, you know, some problems that we have. And I just don't want to see somebody get caught up in it that is, you know, somehow doing the right thing, but all of a sudden we change it and now someone could tell them to get that building material off their property. So can they leave it? And if they can, what do they have to do to secure it?
Go ahead, Mrs. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Bodnar. One of the reasons we added the description of the building material was we had some issues with regards to that. And if you have building material on your property, we are allowing that building material to be stored outside for a 6-month period. There is allowable exceptions in there, and as the supervisor, if an officer goes and looks at the issues, there are, I can allow extensions and grant extensions for the building material. So for example, you've got a house, you bring trusses in and they're stored on the property. Well, by the time you get the trusses up onto the property, the next set of building materials are being brought forward. And as long as there's an ongoing work being done, what we're trying to eliminate is bringing building materials in and having them sit there for a long period of time where those building materials then deteriorate and become debris and refuse. So we will allow and provide extensions with a building material that is on site as long as we can see some progress and work with the individuals to ensure that that building material is being used.
Any other questions?
Just to follow up to that, Mr. Mayor, I think that's a reasonable approach. You know, I don't think we need to be, today was one thing and tomorrow's the next, and get your building material out. So the discretion of staff, and I guess what worried me a little bit is they claimed the building, what if the chief building officer says you can have 2 years or 3 years to do it? Will you confer with that? Will there be something going on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bodnar, we work closely, as you know, with the building department, and we work together trying to resolve these types of issues. If there's an extension on the building permit and building materials brought in, again, as long as these building materials are going to be used and are being stored in a neat pile, we have no issues with that. If you note that it's whether it requires a building permit or does not, because some issues do not require a building permit, and again, we will work with individuals to try and resolve it. We're just trying to eliminate the possibility of storing building materials on the site and keeping them for a long period of time that they deteriorate and become refuse.
Mrs. Kenny, then Mr. Doucette.
Oh, I'm going to continue on with that, but I have an item of my own. So the only reason that makes me concerned is we know we have an area that's exactly what's happened. It's been complained to by an individual for at least 4 years, and it's always the same, I guess, answer back to that individual that it's building material that they're using for renovation. So you said you have a good, close working relationship with the building inspector. So what I'm saying is, does he tell you then when the individual says, I need another 5 years before I can get that built because I'm building that myself? Does he notify you so that you know that that pile that he has there is going to stay there for another 4, 5, 6 years? I just kind of wanted to know that. I have a question about that, so if you can answer that, that would be great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny. Yes, we do have a close working relationship with the building department. We do review the files to determine whether a building permit is on a particular property. If we have questions about the building material itself, we will deal with the chief building official on that issue, but we will work with individuals who are dealing with the material. We don't need the consent of the building official to work with a file. What I can comment is that the previous bylaw, the one we have in effect now, has no time limit on the building material, and we're just putting a time limit on the building material that we have now.
Okay, thank you. And then to my question, in the report itself, page 384, it's in regards to the grass cutting, and the second paragraph says, with respect to repeat offenders, it is proposed that notice is still required to be provided. However, the time frames for cleanup have been reduced by about half. Are we required by law to give them a notice, or can we, because they are repeat offenders and we know that they are repeat offenders, can we immediately go and drop a notice off at their house and say that you must keep your, you have been, I don't know, say it's 3 years, they're repeat offenders. Can we give them notice that there's not going to be any tolerance for that this year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kenny. Each and every offense requires notification. So the original request from council was to have no notification to repeat offenders, which when we created the original bylaw is not allowed. You have to give notification to each and every individual. Same with this, that has not changed. So in order to reduce the time frame, they are a repeat offender, they will get notification that they are in violation, but the time frame to comply has been reduced by approximately 50%. What we've done is round down instead of rounding up.
Okay, thank you.
To set, then Mr. Elliott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sherry. I'm looking at the grass and weeds and starting it May 1st, which is great, instead of June 1st. Especially in the past couple of years, that's been absolutely needed. Now, October 31st or the first frost, are you talking about just a little general frost, or are you talking about a killing frost? Because after a small regular frost, grass keeps growing. There's just a lot of white stuff all over the place, and before you know it, the grass is back up again. I mean, I cut my grass last year till close to the beginning of November, or at the end of mid-November. So I'm just worried about what the frost means.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Doucette. The first significant frost is what we're looking for the growth, as similar as they have in the Weed Control Act, and that's when the Weed Control Act also stipulates with regards to the frost, basically killing the grass or putting it dormant so that there's no longer a growth period.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Sherry. If you're a repeat offender, are you a repeat offender forever, or is there a time limit on it?
Mrs. Hanson.
Well,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. If you become an offender under the lot maintenance bylaw and you become a repeat offender, you are in our system as a repeat offender, and you will have the limited time frame set out in the bylaw as a repeat offender and have the limited reduced time to comply.
Yay. And I have no problem with that because because the definition says if you're in the system, right? So if, you know, by chance something happened tomorrow with me and then like 5 years down the road, I got another notice, am I a repeat offender?
You're incorrigible.
That I am.
Yes, Mr. Elliott, you would be classified as a repeat offender.
There you go. So there's no park granted.
Mr. Bodnar, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Sherry. Sherry, I take it the ones highlighted in yellow are either tweaked or new. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, yes, that's correct. It's been highlighted to give you an overview, so you're not going through the entire bylaw to see what we've added. And I've highlighted in the report the items that we have also introduced to the bylaw. But basically, we've upped a few definitions when we're having difficulties dealing with customers or trying to clarify certain issues, as well as the last portion of trees has been brought over from the property standards bylaw and reduction of the repeat offender.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm happy to see that because that makes it easier for all of us when we're trying to pick out what's new and old. Just on the trees, because everyone knows and sees properties or has a neighbor or something that has maybe a dead ash tree on their land. So it says here, no person shall fail to clear from land dead, decayed, damaged, or diseased trees. So what's the protocol for that? You're not out looking for dead trees. It's a complaint basis?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, everything we're doing right now is on a complaint basis. We have numerous complaints that we are trying to keep up with. And we are not going around looking for the dead trees. We do get complaints. We do have the tree bylaw, which deals with trees adjacent to the road allowance, which may impede and cause a danger to the municipality or the traveling public, which is a separate bylaw. These are trees that are in someone's yard, such as we're dealing with under the property standards bylaw, side yard, rear yards. That would be a issue, and that's what's being dealt with this particular bylaw.
Go ahead.
So that being said, trees that are a danger to the traveling public, does that take effect on fire lanes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, though it's technically still classified as private land to private land. It's when it's a thoroughfare where the traveling public is going through, which the municipality has a consideration for the trees, where they would then go under the tree bylaw that has been passed as per the municipal act with regulations set in there.
So I think what you just told me was no. But the other part of that is that if somebody has a dead tree on their property, whether it's on a fire lane or whatever, it's the property, not where it's located in the municipality?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, it's the location and the area of the tree. So if a tree is located on private property and is not adjacent to municipal property where the traveling public would drive, so a tree would not fall across the road, or someone would not clip their head on a branch hanging low over a sidewalk. Those types of trees are dealt with under the tree bylaw, which we deal with under Public Works as well. This lot maintenance bylaw deals with private trees that are on private property that do not affect or are directly adjacent to municipal property.
And I think that was a yes, so I'm okay.
Any other questions of Mrs. Hanson? There being none, we have a recommendation moved and seconded. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. That concludes all the items for discussion. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Mrs. Kenny? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to give notice, that I'm going to give notice of motion for next meeting in regards that staff be directed to issue an RFP to qualified leak detection firms with terms of reference that require a reduction of lost water to 10%, and that this RFP be issued no later than, I'm going to say, June 30th. Thank you.
Your second notice of motion?
That's that one. That's just that one. That's my notice of motion for next meeting.
That's, okay.
Thank you.
I thought you had
Thank you.
another issue. Are we ready to adjourn the meeting? Mr. Dance? Moved by Mr. Dance, seconded by Mr. Bonner, that this meeting be adjourned. I would now like to call to order the regular meeting of council, 10-18, Monday, April 23rd, 2018, following our committee of the whole meeting. Looking at the agenda, we'd call to order this meeting. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
No, there's not.
I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councilor Kenny, seconded by Councilor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none, it shall be so indicated, Madam Clerk. Call for adoption of minutes. The regular meeting of council 08-18 held on April 9th, 2018. All those in favor? Moved for first by Mr. Bodnar, seconded by Mr. Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Being none, call for approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councilor Demeray, seconded by Councilor Butters. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any proclamations? Madam Clerk.
There's a proclamation for the National Day of Mourning.
That's on April 28th, 2018. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We have minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. Madam Clerk.
Yes, there's the minutes of the Port Colborne Transit Advisory Committee meeting of January 24th, 2018, and minutes of the Public Library Board meeting of February 13th, 2018.
We'll deal with those minutes in bulk. Moved by Councilor Doucette, seconded by Councilor Bodnar. All those in favor? Carried. Consideration of bylaws, Madam Clerk.
There's a number of bylaws tonight. 6571-26-18, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a funding agreement between the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne related to funding provided by the Province of Ontario to the municipality under the Ontario's Main Street Revitalization Initiative. 6572-27-18, being a bylaw to temporarily close sections of various streets to vehicular traffic for the purpose of the Port Colborne Downtown Cruise Nights. 6573-28-18, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement extension with Snips Landscaping and Nurseries respecting contract 2015-09 supply of parks grass cutting services. 6574-29-18, being a bylaw to provide for the maintenance and property of property and land lot maintenance bylaw and to repeal bylaw 6329-09-16. Bylaw 6575-30-18 being a bylaw to regulate the use of lands and the character, location, and use of buildings and structures within the city of Port Colborne. It's a zoning bylaw amendment. 6576-31-18 being an interim control bylaw to regulating the mineral aggregate operational zone. And 6577-32-18 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the corporation of the city of Port Colborne at its regular meeting on April 23rd, 2018.
You've had the bylaws read. Motion to accept those bylaws, moved by Councilor Doucette, seconded by Councilor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. At this time, it's time to call for motion to adjourn. Councilor Thatch moved, seconded by Councilor Demeray. This meeting is adjourned. There's no in-camera meetings this evening.